The train whistle pierced the autumn air of Silverton, Colorado, at precisely 8 o'clock in the morning. But the man Sophia Lawson waited for was nowhere to be seen. She stood on the wooden platform with her single leather trunk at her feet, watching passengers disembark and greet their loved ones with embraces and laughter. The September wind carried the scent of pine from the San Juan mountains that surrounded the mining town, and she pulled her wool shawl tighter around her shoulders. The year was 1878, and she had traveled all the way from Boston to meet a man she had only known through letters for the past 8 months. Franklin Cooper was supposed to be here. His last letter had been clear. He would meet her at the station when the morning train arrived from Durango. Sophia touched the folded paper in her dress pocket, the one where he had written in his bold, uneven script that he could not wait to finally see her face and begin their life together. The station master, a grizzled man with a thick mustache, approached her as the platform emptied. "Miss, do you need assistance finding someone? I am waiting for Franklin Cooper," she said, trying to keep the tremor from her voice. "Do you know him?" The man scratched his beard thoughtfully. "Franklin Cooper. Big fellow, lives up in the high country, traps and hunts mostly." Her heart lifted. Yes, that must be him. "Well, miss, I would not worry too much. The mountain men keep their own time. Could be any number of reasons he is delayed. Weather, distance, tracking something valuable." He tipped his hat. "You are welcome to wait inside where it is warmer." But Sophia shook her head. What if Franklin arrived and did not see her immediately? What if he thought she had not come after all? "I will wait here, thank you." The station master shrugged and returned to his duties, leaving her alone on the platform as the train pulled away with a great hiss of steam and grinding of metal wheels. An hour passed. Then 2. Sophia watched the sun climb higher over the mountains, painting the rocky peaks in shades of gold and amber. Miners walked past in groups, their faces already dark with coal dust even this early in the day. Women in simple calico dresses carried baskets to the general store. Children ran through the dirt streets, playing games she did not recognize. Everyone seemed to have a purpose, a destination, someone waiting for them. Everyone except her. By noon, her feet ached from standing. She finally sat on her trunk, smoothing her traveling dress, which was already dusty from the journey. She had worn her best outfit, a deep blue silk that her mother had helped her pack, saying that first impressions mattered even on the frontier. Now it felt foolish, too fine for this rough mountain town where most women wore practical cotton and wool. Had she made a terrible mistake? Her family had been horrified when she announced her intention to travel west to marry a man she had never met. Her father, a banker in Boston, had called her reckless. Her mother had wept. Her sister had said she was throwing away her life on a fantasy. But Sophia had been drawn to Franklin's letters from the first one. He had responded to an advertisement she had placed almost on a whim, during a period when she felt suffocated by Boston society and its endless rules about what a proper young woman should do, say, wear, think. Franklin wrote about a life of freedom in the mountains, of crisp air and star-filled skies, of building something real with his own hands. He wrote about wanting a partner, not an ornament, someone brave enough to face the wilderness beside him. She was 22 years old, and she wanted to be brave. The third hour came and went. Sophia's stomach growled, but she did not want to leave the platform to find food. What if he came while she was gone? A woman around her mother's age approached, carrying a basket covered with a checkered cloth. "You have been sitting here all morning, dear. Are you all right?" "I am waiting for someone," Sophia said, managing a smile. "I can see that, but you look hungry. Here." The woman pulled back the cloth to reveal fresh bread rolls. "Take one. You cannot wait on an empty stomach." The The kindness nearly brought tears to Sophia's eyes. "Thank you. That is very generous. I am Martha Green. My husband runs the assayer's office." She sat down beside Sophia without invitation, which somehow made it better. "Who are you waiting for, Franklin Cooper?" Martha's eyebrows rose. "The mountain man. Well now, that is interesting. I have seen him come into town a few times. Very tall, very quiet, keeps to himself mostly. Do you think something has happened to him?" The worry that had been building all morning finally broke free. "In these mountains, anything can happen," Martha said honestly. "But Franklin Cooper has a reputation for being tough and capable. If he said he would be here, he will be here. The mountains just have their own schedule." Sophia ate the bread roll slowly, savoring each bite. "I came all the way from Boston. Did you now? That is quite a journey. You must care for him very much. We have been writing letters for months. I feel like I know him, but also like I do not know him at all." She had not meant to be so honest with a stranger, but something about Martha's kind face made the words spill out. "What if he takes one look at me and regrets asking me to come?" Martha patted her hand. "Any man who would ask a woman to travel across the country to be with him is not going to regret it when she shows the courage to actually do it. You are here. That says everything he needs to know about your character." The fourth hour brought clouds rolling over the mountains, threatening rain. The temperature dropped, and Sophia wrapped her shawl more tightly around herself. Her back ached from sitting on the hard trunk. Her eyes strained from watching every trail that led into town, hoping to see a tall figure approaching. Doubt crept in like the cold. Perhaps Franklin had changed his mind. Perhaps he had met someone else. Perhaps his letters had been a game, a way to pass the lonely winter months, and he had never truly intended to follow through. But then she remembered the letter where he had written about his mother, who had died when he was young. The letter where he described watching an eagle teach its young to fly from a cliff face, and how it made him think about courage and trust. The letter where he admitted that he was not good with words, but that he had never felt so understood by another person as he did when he read her responses. Those were not the words of a man playing games. The fifth hour passed with agonizing slowness. The threatened rain began as a light drizzle. Sophia opened her small parasol, though it was hardly adequate against the mountain weather. The station master came out twice to encourage her to wait inside, but she refused both times. Other trains came and went. She watched people arrive and depart, each one a small story she would never know. A young couple reuniting with tears and kisses. An older man being met by 3 children who shouted "Grandpa" and nearly knocked him over. A woman in mourning black being helped down the steps by a conductor, her face hidden behind a veil. Life continued around her while she waited, suspended in uncertainty. By the 6th hour, as the sun began its descent toward the mountain peaks, Sophia felt her hope beginning to fade. It was nearly 2 in the afternoon. She was cold, tired, hungry despite Martha's kindness, and fighting back tears that she refused to let fall in public. She stood up, intending to finally accept defeat and find a hotel room for the night, when she saw him. He came down the main trail into town on a massive bay horse, leading a pack mule behind him. Even from a distance, she could see he was enormous, broad-shouldered and tall in the saddle. He wore buckskin clothing and a wide-brimmed hat, and his hair, dark and wavy, touched his shoulders. As he drew closer, she could see the concern on his face, the way his eyes scanned the platform urgently. He was looking for her. Franklin Cooper dismounted before his horse had fully stopped, his boots hitting the ground with purpose. He was even more striking than she had imagined from his letters. His face was weathered and strong, with a square jaw shadowed by several days of beard growth. His arms, visible where his sleeves were rolled up despite the cool weather, showed muscles built from hard physical work. He stood well over 6 feet tall, making her feel small even though she was not a short woman. Their eyes met across the platform, and something shifted in the world. He crossed the distance between them in long strides, and she could see now that his clothes were splattered with mud, that there was a tear in his shirt, that he looked exhausted. Sophia. Her name on his lips was half question, half prayer. Yes. Her voice came out as a whisper. I am so sorry. The words rushed out of him. There was a rock slide on the mountain pass, blocked the whole trail. I had to go 15 miles out of my way, and then my horse threw a shoe, and I have been riding for 18 hours straight to get here. I was so afraid you would think I was not coming, that you would leave, that you would give up on me. He was breathless, his chest heaving, his eyes searching her face with an intensity that made her heart race. I waited, she said simply. Something softened in his expression, and he smiled for the first time. It transformed his entire face, turning him from intimidating to beautiful. You waited 6 hours. I would have waited longer. Worth every mile. His voice was rough with emotion. Seeing you standing here, knowing you did not give up on me. Worth every single mile I rode. They stood there in the drizzling rain, looking at each other, and Sophia felt 8 months of letters, hopes, and dreams crystallize into something real and solid and true. You are even more beautiful than I imagined, Franklin said, then looked embarrassed, as if he had not meant to say it out loud. You are exactly as I pictured you, she replied, though that was not entirely true. Her imagination had not prepared her for the sheer physical presence of him, the way he seemed to command the space around him simply by existing. Are you cold? Hungry? You must be exhausted from the train and then waiting all this time. His concern was evident, and he started to remove his coat. I am fine now that you are here, and she meant it. The cold and hunger and aching back all seemed insignificant now, but Franklin would not hear of it. Let me take you to the hotel. You need to warm up and rest. I have a room reserved for you. Separate from mine, he added quickly, his cheeks coloring slightly. I want to do this properly. He picked up her trunk as if it weighed nothing, and she watched the muscles in his arms flex with the movement. Then he offered her his other arm, and she took it, feeling the solid strength of him even through the layers of fabric. As they walked toward the hotel, leading his horse behind them, Franklin spoke in a low, earnest voice. I know this is not the beginning you hoped for. I promised I would be here when the train arrived, and I failed. You did not fail, Sophia interrupted. You could not control a rock slide. You rode through the night to get here. That is not failure, Franklin. That is dedication. He looked down at her, and she saw something vulnerable in his eyes, something that made her realize how nervous he was, how much this moment mattered to him. I have been thinking about this day for months, he admitted. I must have imagined our first meeting 100 different ways. None of them involved making you wait alone at a train station in the rain. Well, life rarely follows our plans exactly, does it? She smiled up at him. But we are here now, together. That is what matters. The hotel was a modest 2-story building with a sign that read Silver Creek Hotel. Franklin arranged for her room with the clerk, a thin young man who kept glancing between them with obvious curiosity. Small towns thrived on gossip, Sophia realized. By tomorrow, everyone in Silverton would know that Franklin Cooper had brought a woman from back east. I will let you rest, Franklin said when they reached her room on the 2nd floor. He set her trunk down gently. But I would like to take you to dinner tonight if you are willing. There is a decent restaurant 2 streets over. Nothing fancy, but the food is good. I would like that very much. He nodded, looking pleased. 6 o'clock, 6 o'clock, she agreed. After he left, Sophia sat on the bed and let out a long breath. Her hands were trembling slightly, though whether from exhaustion, cold, or the intensity of finally meeting Franklin, she was not sure. Probably all three. She stood and went to the small mirror above the washstand, grimacing at her reflection. Her hair had come loose from its pins, her dress was wrinkled and damp, and she looked as exhausted as she felt. Not exactly the impression she had hoped to make, but Franklin had called her beautiful. She poured water from the pitcher into the basin and washed her face and hands, then worked on fixing her hair. As she did, she thought about the way Franklin had looked at her, the sincerity in his voice when he apologized, the gentleness in his hands as he helped her walk despite his obvious strength. The letters had not prepared her for the reality of him. They had told her about his character, his thoughts, his dreams, but they had not conveyed the way her heart beat faster when he smiled, or the strange sense of rightness she felt standing beside him. A knock on the door startled her from her thoughts. When she opened it, she found Martha Green standing there with a bundle in her arms. "I heard Franklin Cooper finally showed up and that you were staying here," Martha said, bustling into the room without waiting for an invitation. "I thought you might need some help getting ready for dinner." A woman needs another woman at times like these. Sophia felt a wave of gratitude. "You are very kind, Mrs. Green." "Martha, please, and it is no trouble at all. I remember what it was like when I first came west to meet my husband. Everything was so different, so overwhelming. You need a friend, and I am volunteering for the position." Over the next few hours, Martha helped Sophia unpack, pressed her dresses, and provided a running commentary on life in Silverton that was both informative and entertaining. She learned that the town had boomed with the silver mining rush, that winters were harsh but beautiful, that the community was tight-knit but welcoming to newcomers who proved themselves willing to work hard and contribute. "Now, about Franklin Cooper," Martha said as she helped Sophia into a fresh dress, a deep green that brought out her eyes. "I want you to understand something about mountain men. They are different from the men you knew back east. They are independent, used to solitude, and they do not always know how to express themselves with words." "His letters were very expressive," Sophia said. "Were they now? That is interesting. Maybe he is better with written words than spoken ones. Some men are like that." Martha fastened the buttons up the back of the dress. "But what I am trying to say is that if Franklin asked you to come all this way, he is serious about you. Men like him do not play games with people's hearts. They do not have time for nonsense." "I appreciate that," Sophia said. In Boston, courtship was often about appearances and social position. It felt so artificial. "Well, you will not find that here. What you see is what you get on the frontier. It is one of the things I love about the West." Martha stepped back to assess her work. "There, you look lovely." He will not be able to take his eyes off you. When Franklin knocked on her door at precisely 6 o'clock, Sophia saw that he had also cleaned up. He had shaved, though he had left a neatly trimmed beard that suited his rugged features. His hair was still damp, pulled back and tied at the base of his neck. He wore clean clothes, dark trousers and a white shirt with a leather vest, and he held his hat in his hands. "You look beautiful," he said, and this time he did not seem embarrassed by the words. "You look very handsome yourself." They walked through the evening streets of Silverton together, and Sophia was acutely aware of the people watching them from windows and doorways. Franklin seemed unbothered by the attention, his hand light on her elbow as he guided her around mud puddles and over uneven boardwalks. The restaurant he took her to was called the Mountain View, and it lived up to its name with large windows that looked out at the surrounding peaks, now silhouetted against a sky streaked with orange and purple as the sun set. They sat across from each other at a small table, and for a moment, neither of them seemed to know what to say. The ease of their written correspondence felt harder to access in person, with the physical reality of each other to navigate. "I am not very good at this," Franklin finally said, his hands flat on the table. "Talking in person, I mean. I always feel like my words come out wrong." "Your words in the letters were never wrong," Sophia said gently. "They were honest and thoughtful. That is all I need from you." He met her eyes and she saw relief there. "I can do honest. Honest is easy compared to trying to be clever or charming. Then let us both just be honest with each other." "All right." He took a breath. "Honestly, I have been terrified for weeks that you would arrive and realize you had made a mistake, that the reality of me and this life would not match what you had imagined from the letters." Sophia considered this carefully before responding. "I would be lying if I said I was not nervous too. But Franklin, I did not come here expecting perfection. I came here because your letters made me feel understood in a way I never have before, because you wrote about building a real life, not playing at one, because you seem to value the same things I do." "What things?" "Honesty, freedom, partnership, the courage to step away from what is expected and create something true." She leaned forward slightly. "I know the reality will be different from what I imagined. It will be harder in some ways, better in others. But I did not travel across the country on a whim, Franklin. I came because I believe we could build something good together." The waitress arrived with their food before he could respond, but Sophia saw the emotion working in his face, the way he looked at her with something like wonder. They ate and talked, and gradually the conversation became easier. Franklin told her about the rock slide in more detail, about how he had felt panic rising in his chest as he realized how badly delayed he would be. Sophia told him about the journey west, about leaving her family, about Martha's kindness at the train station. "I am glad Martha was there," Franklin said. "She is good people, her husband too. They will be good friends to you here." "You have many friends in town?" Sophia asked. He shrugged. "I am friendly with folks, but I do not spend much time in Silverton. My cabin is about 8 miles up in the mountains. I come to town every few weeks for supplies and to sell furs or meat. Most of my time is spent alone in the high country." This was something they had discussed in their letters, but hearing him say it made it feel more real. "Will I be living in the cabin with you, after we marry, if you are willing?" He looked uncertain again. "I know it is not what you are used to. It is rough living, Sophia. No servants, no fine things. Just a small cabin I built with my own hands and whatever we can make or grow or hunt." "That sounds perfect to me. You say that now, but you have not experienced a winter in the high country. The snow can be 8 feet deep. We can be snowed in for weeks at a time. It is isolating and hard. But we would face it together," she said firmly. "That is the difference, is it not? You have been facing it alone, but you would not be alone anymore." Something shifted in Franklin's expression, a wall coming down. "No," he said softly, "I would not be alone anymore." They stayed at the restaurant until it closed, talking about everything and nothing. Sophia learned that Franklin was 26 years old, that he had come west after his mother died, and his father remarried a woman who made it clear she had no use for a stepson. He had worked as a ranch hand, a prospector, and a guide before finally settling into trapping and hunting in the high country. "I like the solitude," he said. "Or I thought I did. But after my father died last year, I realized I did not want to spend my whole life alone. I wanted someone to share it with, not just anyone though, someone who would understand why I choose this life, someone who would not try to change me or make me into something I am not." "I do not want to change you," Sophia said. "I want to know you, the real you, not some polished version." "Then you will get to know me," he promised. All of me, for better or worse. When he walked her back to the hotel, the streets were quiet and the stars were brilliant overhead in a way they never were in Boston. Sophia stopped to stare up at them, overwhelmed by their number and brightness. "It is incredible," she breathed. "Wait until you see them from the high country," Franklin said, standing close beside her. "No buildings, no lanterns, just you and the sky." She turned to look at him and found him already looking at her. The moment stretched between them, full of potential and promise. "Thank you for waiting for me today," he said quietly. 6 hours. In the cold and rain, you could have left, assumed I was not coming, but you waited. I had faith in you. I will not give you reason to regret that faith." He lifted his hand as if to touch her face, then seemed to think better of it and let it fall back to his side. "I should let you rest. Tomorrow, I thought maybe I could show you around Silverton, introduce you to some people. If you are going to live here, you should get to know the town and the community." "I would like that." "Good. I will come by around 9 if that suits you." 9 is perfect. They stood there for another moment, neither wanting to break the spell, until finally Franklin took a step back. "Good night, Sophia." "Good night, Franklin." She watched him walk away, his tall figure disappearing into the darkness, and she hugged herself against the cold, feeling happier than she had in a very long time. The next morning dawned clear and bright. Sophia dressed carefully in a practical cotton dress and sturdy boots that Martha had recommended she bring. When Franklin arrived at 9, he had traded his buckskin clothing for town clothes again, though she found herself preferring the buckskin. It suited him better. He took her first to meet the Reverend, a jovial man named Reverend Phillips, who welcomed her warmly and seemed delighted at the prospect of performing a wedding ceremony. "When are you thinking?" he asked Franklin. Franklin looked at Sophia. "That is up to the lady." "I do not want to rush you," he said to her. "You should have time to be sure this is what you want." But Sophia had already crossed a continent for this. What more certainty did she need? 2 weeks, she said. "That will give me time to prepare and get to know you better in person." "But I see no reason to wait longer than that." Franklin's smile was like sunrise. 2 weeks, then. They spent the rest of the morning walking through Silverton. Franklin introduced her to the shopkeepers, the blacksmith, the doctor. Everyone was curious about her, but most were welcoming. She met several other women who had come west to marry men they barely knew, and she found comfort in their stories of adjustment and eventual happiness. In the afternoon, Franklin took her on a short ride into the foothills so she could see some of the country surrounding the town. He kept the pace easy, mindful that she was not an experienced rider, and he pointed out landmarks and wildlife with the easy knowledge of someone who had spent years studying the land. "That peak there, the one that looks like it has a split top. That is where my cabin is, on the eastern slope below the tree line." Sophia studied it, trying to imagine her new home. "How big is the cabin?" "Not very. One main room with a fireplace, a separate small room for sleeping, a root cellar below for storage. There is a stream nearby for water. The hunting and trapping are good in that area." He glanced at her. "I know it is not much." "It sounds wonderful," she said honestly. "In Boston, I lived in a large house with many rooms, but it never felt like mine. It was my father's house, following my father's rules. I would rather have a small cabin that belongs to us than a mansion that belongs to someone else." "That is a good way of looking at it." They stopped by a meadow filled with wildflowers, even this late in the season. Franklin helped her down from her horse, his hands strong and sure at her waist, and they walked through the grass together. "Can I ask you something?" Sophia said after a while. "Anything? Why did you decide to look for a wife through correspondence? You are a handsome man. I imagine there are women in Silverton who would have been interested." Franklin was quiet for a moment, and she worried she had overstepped. But then he said, "The women in Silverton want husbands who will stay in town, who will work in the mines or open shops. They want a more settled life, and I cannot blame them for that. But I knew I could not be happy living that way. I needed someone who would choose this life deliberately, who would come to it with their eyes open rather than settling for it reluctantly." "That makes sense." And he continued, his voice softer, "I thought maybe writing letters would let me show who I really am better than I could in person. I am not smooth with words when I am speaking. I get tongue-tied and say things wrong. But when I write, I can think through what I want to say. I can be honest without stumbling over myself." Sophia stopped walking and turned to face him. "Franklin, you do not stumble. You speak just fine, and even if you did, it would not matter to me. I did not fall for your eloquence. I fell for your honesty and your heart." He looked at her with such intensity that she felt her breath catch. "You fell for me." She had not meant to say it quite so directly, but there was no taking it back now. "Yes," she said simply. "I fell for you through your letters, and now, meeting you in person, I am falling even harder." Franklin reached out and gently cupped her face with one large, calloused hand. His touch was surprisingly tender for such a big man. "I fell for you too," he said. "The first letter you sent, where you wrote about feeling trapped by expectations and hungry for freedom. I read that and I thought, here is someone who understands. Here is someone brave enough to admit what they want and to reach for it." "I am not as brave as you think," Sophia whispered. "You are braver. I just withdrew from a world that did not suit me." "You are actively changing your entire life, leaving everything you know. That takes real courage." Then he leaned down and kissed her, soft and careful, as if she were something precious. Sophia's eyes fluttered closed and she leaned into him, her hands coming up to rest on his chest. She could feel his heart beating fast beneath her palms, could feel the leashed strength in his body as he held himself in check. When they pulled apart, both were breathing harder. "I have wanted to do that since the moment I saw you on the platform," Franklin admitted. "I have wanted you to," Sophia said, then blushed at her own boldness. But Franklin just smiled and took her hand, threading his fingers through hers. "Come on, let me show you more of your new home." The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of preparation and courtship. Sophia spent her days getting to know the town and the people who would be her neighbors. Martha became a true friend, teaching her practical skills she would need for mountain living. How to preserve food, how to make soap, how to mend clothes so they would last through hard use. The other women in town welcomed her into their community with varying degrees of warmth. Some were genuinely kind, like Martha. Others were more reserved, waiting to see if she would last. A few seemed almost resentful, though Sophia could not figure out why until Martha explained. "Franklin Cooper is quite a catch around here, even if he is not interested in town life. He is strong, capable, handsome, and has a good reputation. Some women had their eye on him, hoping he would change his mind about living in the mountains. You coming along and taking him off the market entirely has caused some jealousy." Sophia had not considered this. "Should I be worried?" "No," Martha said firmly. "Franklin has made his choice clear. And besides, you have every right to be here. You did not steal him, he asked you to come." Still, it made Sophia more aware of the curious and sometimes hostile looks she received from certain women when she walked through town. Franklin spent his days preparing for their marriage in practical ways. He made a trip up to his cabin to stock it with supplies and make sure everything was in good repair. He arranged for the reverend and made sure Sophia had everything she needed. And every evening he took her to dinner or for a walk, and they talked for hours. Sophia learned more about him with each conversation. She learned that he had a dry sense of humor that caught her off guard and made her laugh. She learned that he was surprisingly well-read, with a collection of books at his cabin that he had accumulated over the years. She learned that he could track any animal in these mountains, that he could predict the weather by reading the sky and the behavior of birds, that he had once spent 3 days snowed into a small cave with nothing but jerky and melted snow to sustain him. "Were you frightened?" she asked. "Not really. I had shelter and enough food. I knew I would survive. It was just a matter of waiting out the storm." "I think I would have been terrified." "You would be surprised what you can handle when you have to," Franklin said. "Fear is natural, but it does not have to control you. You just acknowledge it and keep doing what needs to be done." She also learned that he had a protective streak that showed itself in small ways. The way he positioned himself between her and any potential danger, even something as minor as a startled horse. The way he checked her boots before a walk to make sure they were tied properly. The way his eyes constantly scanned their surroundings, aware of everything happening around them. "Do you ever relax?" she asked him one evening as they sat on a bench outside the hotel. "I am relaxed now." "You are watching every person who walks by." He looked slightly sheepish. "It is habit, I suppose. In the mountains, not paying attention can get you killed. A bear, a mountain lion, a sudden storm. You learn to always be aware." "I will have to learn that too." "I will teach you," he promised. "Everything you need to know to be safe and comfortable in the high country." The night before their wedding, Martha hosted a small gathering for Sophia with several of the town women. They brought gifts, practical things like warm blankets, canned goods, and sturdy cookware. They shared advice and stories, some funny, some serious. "Mountain winters are no joke," one woman said. "Make sure you have enough food stored. You do not want to be caught short in February with 8 feet of snow between you and town." "Learn to shoot," another woman advised. "Franklin can teach you. You will need to be able to protect yourself when he is out checking traps. But also remember to enjoy it," Martha added. "Yes, it is hard work, but there is beauty too, and you will have each other. That is worth more than comfort." Sophia went to bed that night feeling nervous but ready. Tomorrow she would marry Franklin Cooper and begin a life entirely different from anything she had known before. The wedding took place at noon in the small church at the edge of town. Sophia wore a simple white dress that Martha had helped her alter to fit perfectly. She carried wildflowers that Franklin had picked that morning from the high meadows. Franklin waited for her at the altar in his best clothes, his hair neatly tied back, his eyes locked on her from the moment she entered. As she walked down the aisle toward him, she saw nothing but him. The rest of the world faded away until it was just the two of them and the promise they were about to make. Reverend Phillips performed a simple ceremony. They exchanged vows, traditional words that felt weighty and real. When Franklin said, "I do," his voice was steady and sure. When Sophia said the same, she meant it with her whole heart. "You may kiss your bride," Reverend Phillips said with a smile. Franklin took her face in both his hands and kissed her thoroughly, not caring that half the town was watching. When they broke apart, Sophia was dizzy and flushed, and Franklin was grinning like he had won a prize. They were married. The town had organized a reception at the hotel, with food and music and dancing. Sophia found herself passed from partner to partner as various men asked her to dance, while Franklin watched from the side with an expression that was part amusement, part possessiveness. Finally, he cut in, pulling her into his arms for a slow dance. "Having fun?" he asked. "It is lovely," she said. "Everyone has been so kind. They like you. I can tell." He pulled her a little closer. "But I am ready to leave whenever you are. I want you all to myself." Heat flushed through her at the implication in his words. "We can leave soon," she said softly. "Are you nervous?" His voice was gentle. "A little," she admitted, but also excited. Is that strange? No, I am nervous too and excited. He leaned down to speak quietly in her ear. I promise I will be gentle with you. I will never hurt you, Sophia, not in any way. She believed him. They left the reception an hour later, amid cheers and well wishes. Franklin had arranged for their things to be loaded onto a pack horse, and he helped Sophia onto her own mount with careful hands. It is about a 3-hour ride to the cabin, he told her. We will take it slow and easy. Just follow my lead, and let me know if you need to stop and rest. The ride up into the mountains was breathtaking. The trail wound through dense pine forests and across rushing streams, climbing steadily higher. The air grew thinner and cooler, scented with evergreen and wildflowers. Sophia saw a deer watching them from the trees and later, an eagle soaring overhead. Franklin kept checking on her, making sure she was comfortable, adjusting their pace to suit her. He pointed out landmarks and trails, teaching her the geography of her new home. As the sun began to set, they emerged into a clearing, and Sophia saw the cabin for the first time. It was small, just as Franklin had said, built of sturdy logs with a stone chimney and a covered porch. But it was beautiful in its simplicity, nestled against the mountain with a view that took her breath away. "Welcome home," Franklin said, dismounting and coming to help her down. She stood in the clearing, turning slowly to take it all in. The cabin, the mountains rising all around them, the endless forest, the stream she could hear babbling nearby. It was so different from Boston, from everything she had ever known. "What do you think?" Franklin asked, and she heard the nervousness in his voice. "I think it is perfect." Relief washed over his face. He took her hand and led her to the cabin door, then surprised her by sweeping her up into his arms. "Franklin," she laughed, clinging to his neck. "It is tradition," he said, carrying her over the threshold. "New bride, new home." Inside, the cabin was clean and cozy. The main room held a fireplace, a sturdy table with 2 chairs, shelves lined with books and supplies, and a comfortable-looking armchair near the hearth. Colorful rag rugs covered the wooden floor. The separate bedroom held a large bed covered with quilts, a trunk for storage, and little else. Franklin set her down gently. "I know it is not fancy." "I do not want fancy," Sophia said. "I want real. And this is real, Franklin. This is a home you built with your own hands. That means more than any mansion." He pulled her close, resting his forehead against hers. "I cannot believe you are really here, after months of letters and hoping and planning. You are really here in my home, my wife." "I am," she whispered, "where I want to be." He kissed her then, deep and searching, his hands sliding into her hair and dislodging her careful pinning. Sophia kissed him back with equal fervor, her fingers working at the buttons of his vest. They undressed each other slowly, carefully, learning the landscape of each other's bodies with gentle hands and whispered words. Franklin was patient and tender, mindful of her inexperience, and when they finally came together, it was with a sense of rightness that Sophia felt in her very soul. Afterward they lay tangled in the quilts, the firelight casting dancing shadows on the walls. Franklin held her close, one large hand stroking her hair. "Are you all right?" he asked softly. "More than all right." She snuggled closer to his warmth. "I am happy, Franklin, truly happy, good. That is all I want, to make you happy and keep you safe. You do, you will." She kissed his chest, right over his heart. "We will make each other happy." They fell asleep like that, wrapped around each other, and Sophia slept more peacefully than she had in months. The next morning, she woke to find Franklin already up, cooking breakfast over the fireplace. The smell of coffee and frying bacon filled the cabin. "Good morning, wife," he said with a smile when he saw her watching him from the doorway of the bedroom. "Good morning, husband." The words felt new and wonderful in her mouth. They ate breakfast together, And then Franklin began teaching her the routines of mountain life. He showed her where he kept supplies, how to maintain the fire, how to draw water from the stream. He was patient and thorough, making sure she understood everything. "I will be going out to check my trap lines in a few days," he said. "I will be gone for 2 or 3 days at a time. You will need to be able to manage things here on your own." The thought was daunting, but Sophia nodded. "Teach me everything I need to know." And he did. Over the following weeks, Franklin taught her how to shoot, how to skin and clean game, how to preserve meat. He taught her which plants were edible and which were poisonous, how to read the weather, how to tell if an animal had passed nearby and how long ago. Sophia proved to be a quick learner. She had good instincts and was not afraid of hard work or getting her hands dirty. Franklin seemed pleased with her progress, and his pride in her abilities made her glow with satisfaction. But it was not all work. They also spent long hours simply enjoying each other's company. Franklin read to her in the evenings by firelight, his deep voice bringing stories to life. They took walks through the forest, and he showed her hidden waterfalls and meadows filled with wildflowers. They made love with increasing confidence and joy, learning what pleased each other. Sophia found herself happier than she had ever been. The work was hard, certainly harder than anything she had done in Boston. Her hands grew calloused, her muscles grew stronger, and her skin became sun-touched, despite her best efforts to prevent it. But she felt alive in a way she never had before. She was building something real with her own hands alongside a man she loved deeply. One morning, about 6 weeks after their wedding, Sophia woke feeling queasy. She barely made it outside before losing the contents of her stomach. Franklin came running, concern written all over his face. "Are you all right? What is wrong?" But even as he asked, understanding dawned on both their faces at the same time. "I think I might be pregnant," Sophia said, wonder in her voice. Franklin's face went through several emotions at once: shock, joy, worry. "Are you sure?" "Not certain, but I have missed my courses, and now this." She gestured at the evidence of her sickness. He pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. "A baby," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "We are going to have a baby. Are you happy?" She pulled back to look at his face. "Happy? Sophia, I am terrified and thrilled and overwhelmed and ecstatic all at once." He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. "A baby, our baby." The pregnancy brought new challenges and adjustments. Sophia's morning sickness lasted for several weeks, and Franklin was endlessly patient, bringing her ginger tea and crackers, rubbing her back when she was ill, and worrying constantly. "Maybe we should move to town until the baby comes," he said one evening. "So you are closer to the doctor." But Sophia refused. "I want our baby to be born here in our home. Besides, women have been having babies in the mountains for generations. I will be fine." "You do not know that." "No," she agreed. "But I trust my body and I trust you. We will manage." As fall turned to winter, the first snows came. Sophia watched in awe as the landscape transformed into a wonderland of white. Franklin worked tirelessly to ensure they had enough firewood stacked, enough food stored, everything they would need to survive the harsh mountain winter. True to his word, the snow eventually grew deep enough that leaving the cabin became difficult. But Sophia did not feel trapped or isolated as she had worried she might. Instead, she felt cocooned in a world of their own making. She and Franklin spent long evenings talking, reading, making plans for the baby. "What do you hope for, boy or girl?" she asked him one night as they lay in bed, his hand resting on her growing belly. "I do not care either way, as long as you both come through healthy. But if you had to choose—" He was quiet for a moment. "A girl," he finally said. "A little girl with your courage and spirit, Though God help me, I would probably be terrified every second raising a daughter in this rough country." Sophia laughed. "And I was going to say I hoped for a boy like you. Strong and protective and kind." "Well, we will love whatever we get," Franklin said. "Boy or girl, as long as they are healthy." The baby started moving around the 5th month, gentle flutters that grew into strong kicks. Franklin was fascinated, spending hours with his hand on her belly feeling their child move. "Hello in there," he would murmur. "This is your father. I cannot wait to meet you." Christmas came, and though they were isolated in the mountains, they made it special. Franklin surprised Sophia with a rocking chair he had been secretly building in the shed, perfect for nursing the baby. She gave him a new hunting knife she had ordered from the general store on their last trip to town before the heavy snows, with his initials carved into the handle. "It is perfect," he said, testing the balance and sharpness. "Thank you. Thank you for my chair. It is beautiful. You are so talented with woodwork." "I want everything to be ready for when the baby comes," he said seriously. "I have been working on a cradle too. It should be finished in a few weeks." As winter deepened and Sophia's belly grew, they prepared for the birth. Martha made the difficult journey up to the cabin during a break in the weather, bringing supplies and advice. "You are looking healthy," she pronounced after examining Sophia. "The baby seems to be positioned well. I do not foresee any problems, but I want you to send for me when your time comes. Franklin, can you make it to town and back quickly if needed?" "I can make it in under 2 hours if I have to," Franklin said. "Faster if I take the shortcut through the pass." "Good. And Sophia, you need to stay warm and rested. No overexerting yourself. Let Franklin do the heavy work." After Martha left, Franklin became even more protective. He barely let Sophia lift anything heavier than a book. He checked on her constantly, worried about every twinge and discomfort. "I am pregnant, not made of glass," she finally told him, exasperated but touched by his concern. "I know, but you are carrying the most precious thing in the world to me. I cannot help but worry." "We are both precious to you," she corrected. "The baby and me." "Yes," he agreed, pulling her into his arms as carefully as if she might break. "Both of you, my whole world." The baby came in early March, during one of those last fierce winter storms that seemed determined to prove winter's strength before giving way to spring. Sophia's labor started in the middle of the night, and Franklin woke immediately to her quiet gasp of pain. "Is it time?" His voice was calm, but she could see the fear in his eyes. "I think so." He was up in an instant, building up the fire, heating water, gathering the supplies they had prepared. "I am going to ride for Martha." "There is no time," Sophia said as another contraction hit. "This baby is coming fast. But I do not know what to do. You have helped animals give birth." "It cannot be that different." She tried to smile through the pain. "We can do this, Franklin, together." He took a deep breath and nodded, his fear transforming into determination. "All right, tell me what you need." The next several hours were intense and painful and terrifying and miraculous all at once. Franklin stayed by her side, his strength anchoring her as wave after wave of contractions rolled through her body. He murmured encouragement, wiped her face with cool cloths, supported her when she needed to move, and somehow managed to stay calm even though she could see he was scared. Finally, as dawn broke and light began filtering through the windows, their daughter entered the world with a strong, healthy cry. Franklin caught her with trembling hands, tears streaming down his face as he carefully cleaned her and wrapped her in soft blankets. "A girl," he said, his voice breaking. "We have a daughter, Sophia, a beautiful little girl." He placed the baby in Sophia's arms, and she looked down at the tiny, perfect face, feeling love explode in her chest so powerfully it almost hurt. "Hello, little one," she whispered. "We have been waiting for you." Franklin sat beside them on the bed, his arm around Sophia, his eyes fixed on his daughter. She is perfect, absolutely perfect. Look at her tiny fingers, and she has your nose. And your dark hair, Sophia said, touching the soft down on the baby's head. They sat like that for a long time, the three of them together, while the storm raged outside and the fire crackled in the hearth. "What should we name her?" Franklin asked eventually. They had discussed names throughout the pregnancy, but had not decided on anything final. Now, looking at their daughter, Sophia knew. "Grace," she said. "Her name is Grace, because she is a grace in our lives, an unexpected blessing." "Grace Cooper," Franklin said, testing it out. "I like it, Grace it is." Once Sophia and the baby were resting comfortably, Franklin rode to town through the tail end of the storm to fetch Martha and inform everyone of the birth. He returned with Martha and half the town's good wishes, it seemed, in the form of gifts and meals and congratulations. Martha examined both Sophia and baby Grace, pronounced them both healthy, and then proceeded to instruct Franklin on the finer points of caring for a newborn. "Change her frequently, support her head, make sure Sophia gets plenty of rest and food to keep her milk supply up," Martha rattled off. "And do not panic at every little noise the baby makes. They make lots of strange sounds. It is normal." Franklin absorbed all the information like a man studying a survival manual, asking questions and taking mental notes. His dedication to being a good father was evident in every word and gesture. After Martha left, promising to return in a week to check on them again, Franklin and Sophia settled into the rhythms of new parenthood. It was exhausting and challenging and wonderful all at once. Grace was a good baby, healthy and strong, but she still needed constant care and attention. Franklin was hands-on in a way that surprised Sophia. He changed diapers without complaint, walked the floor with Grace when she was fussy, and sang to her in his deep, rumbling voice that seemed to soothe her immediately. Watching this large, powerful mountain man cradle their tiny daughter with such tenderness made Sophia fall in love with him all over again. "You are a natural father," she told him one evening as she watched him rock Grace to sleep. "I am just trying not to break her," he said with a slight smile. "She is so small and fragile, but you are so gentle with her. She knows she is safe in your arms." "I want her to always feel safe," Franklin said seriously. "I want her to grow up knowing she is loved and protected and valued. I want her to have the kind of confidence and courage you have, to know she can do hard things and survive and thrive." "She will," Sophia said softly. "We will teach her together." Spring came gradually to the mountains, the snow melting in fits and starts. As soon as the trails were passable, Franklin began making regular trips to town for supplies and to sell his winter's accumulation of furs. He always returned with treats for Sophia and news from the outside world. Life settled into a new normal. Sophia managed the cabin and cared for Grace while Franklin worked the trap lines and hunted. But they always made time for each other, for talking and laughing and simply being together. Their love, which had started as words on paper and grown through shared experiences, deepened into something solid and enduring. Grace thrived, growing from a tiny newborn into a chubby, happy baby who smiled at everything and everyone. She particularly adored her father, her face lighting up whenever he walked into the room. "I think you are her favorite," Sophia teased one afternoon, watching Grace giggle as Franklin made silly faces at her. "Nonsense. She loves you best. I am just the entertaining one." "You are her whole world, Franklin. Both of you are." That first summer with Grace was magical. They took her on walks through the meadows, letting her feel the soft grass and smell the wildflowers. They introduced her to the horses and showed her the birds and deer. Franklin built a safe play area outside where Grace could sit on a blanket and enjoy the sunshine under their watchful eyes. Friends from town visited occasionally, making the journey up to see how the little family was doing. Martha came most often, bringing news and supplies and her warm friendship. She doted on Grace, and Grace seemed to recognize her as someone special. "She is going to be a heartbreaker when she grows up," Martha predicted. "Look at those eyes. She's going to have every boy in Silverton falling over himself." "Not if I have anything to say about it," Franklin said with mock sternness, though his eyes were twinkling. "You cannot protect her from everything," Martha chided gently, "though I have no doubt you will try." As fall approached and Grace's first birthday drew near, Sophia found herself reflecting on how much her life had changed. A year and a half ago, she had been in Boston, frustrated and restless, longing for something more. Now she was in a cabin in the Colorado mountains with a husband she adored and a daughter she would die for, living a life of purpose and meaning. It was not easy. The work was hard, the isolation sometimes challenging, especially in the deep winter. But it was real and it was theirs, built on love and trust and partnership. On Grace's first birthday, they had a small celebration. Just the three of them, since the weather was turning and travel was becoming difficult. Franklin had carved a beautiful wooden toy for Grace, a little horse that rocked back and forth. Sophia had made a cake, simple but sweet, and they let Grace smash her hands into it and make a delightful mess. "Hard to believe a whole year has passed," Franklin said that evening after Grace was asleep. He and Sophia sat by the fire, her head on his shoulder. "The fastest and slowest year of my life," Sophia said. "Sometimes I feel like I just arrived at the train station yesterday. Other times I cannot imagine my life before this. Do you ever regret it, leaving Boston, coming here?" She turned to look at him, seeing the vulnerability in his question. "Never, not for one single moment. Do you regret asking me to come?" "Never," he echoed. "You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Sophia. You and Grace. You gave me a family, a purpose beyond just surviving. You made my life worth living." "You did the same for me," she said, kissing him softly. "We saved each other, I think." The years passed, marked by the changing seasons and the milestones of Grace's growth. She took her first steps, spoke her first words, grew from a baby into a toddler and then a little girl. Franklin and Sophia watched with pride and wonder, marveling at the person she was becoming. When Grace was 3, Sophia became pregnant again. This time the pregnancy felt easier, perhaps because she knew what to expect. Or perhaps because Grace kept her so busy she had less time to worry. This baby, another girl they named Hope, was born on a beautiful June morning with Martha in attendance and Grace watching with wide, fascinated eyes from Franklin's arms. "Another sister," Franklin told Grace. "You have to help Mama and me take care of her." And Grace took her role as big sister seriously, always wanting to help, to hold the baby, to sing to her. Watching his daughters together made Franklin's eyes well up with tears more than once. "I am the luckiest man alive," he told Sophia one evening. "2 beautiful daughters and a wife I love more each day. What did I ever do to deserve this?" "You opened your heart," Sophia said. "You were brave enough to reach out and ask for what you wanted, and you have been a good man, a good husband, a good father every single day since." 2 years later, their son was born, a healthy boy they named Samuel. Franklin was overjoyed to have a son, though he insisted he had been perfectly happy with his daughters. "Now I have someone to teach hunting and trapping," he said, gazing down at tiny Samuel. "Though I am teaching the girls too," he added quickly. "They need to know how to take care of themselves." And he did teach them. As Grace and Hope grew, Franklin taught them to track and hunt, to read the land and weather, to be strong and capable. Sophia taught them to read and write, to cook and preserve food, to appreciate beauty and kindness. Together they raised their children to be tough and tender, independent and loving. The cabin, which had seemed adequate for two, became cramped with five. So Franklin built an addition, adding 2 more bedrooms and expanding the main room. It was hard work, but he did it with joy, knowing he was building a future for his family. Sophia sometimes thought about the life she had left behind in Boston. Her family had eventually accepted her choice, though they still did not fully understand it. She received occasional letters from her mother and sister, sharing news from that distant world that felt more and more foreign to her. She wrote back, sharing stories of her children and her life, trying to convey the richness and fullness of it even though she knew they could not truly comprehend. Grace, Hope, and Samuel grew up wild and free in the mountains, learning to love the land as their parents did. They played in the streams, climbed the rocks, explored the forests. They learned which plants were safe and which were dangerous, how to respect the wildlife, how to find their way home no matter how far they wandered. The family made regular trips to Silverton, and the children became well known in town. Grace, with her quick mind and fearless spirit, often shocked the townspeople with her unconventional ways. Hope, gentler but no less strong, had a gift for making friends wherever she went. And Samuel, even as a young boy, showed signs of inheriting his father's size and strength. "Your family is quite something," Martha told Sophia one day when they were in town together, watching the children play with other youngsters in the street. "Those kids are being raised right. Tough enough to survive anything, kind enough to care about others. You and Franklin should be proud." "We are," Sophia said, "every single day." As the children grew older, they began to develop their own interests and personalities. Grace, true to her name, moved through the world with a natural grace and confidence. She was fearless, always pushing boundaries, always curious about what lay beyond the next mountain. Hope was more thoughtful, with an artistic soul that expressed itself in drawings and stories. Samuel was practical and steady, with a deep love for the animals and land. Franklin taught them all to shoot, and they became proficient by the time they were 10 years old. Not for sport, but for survival and protection. "A gun is a tool like an axe or a knife," he told them seriously. "You respect it, you know how to use it, and you only use it when necessary. Understand?" "Yes, Papa," they chorused. Sophia taught them mathematics and literature, determined that her children would be educated even if they lived in the wilderness. She ordered books from catalogs, and the cabin's shelves filled with volumes on every subject imaginable. The children devoured them all, hungry for knowledge about the wider world. When Grace turned 13, she asked her parents about Boston, about the life Sophia had left behind. "Do you ever want to go back?" Grace asked. Sophia considered the question carefully. "Sometimes I am curious about how it has changed, about how my family is doing, but go back to live there? No. That life was not right for me, Grace. This is where I belong. Here with your father and you children in these mountains. This is my home." "But what if we want something different?" Grace asked. "What if I want to see cities and oceans and all the places in the books?" Franklin and Sophia exchanged glances. They had known this day would come, when their children would start looking beyond the mountains. "Then we will support you," Franklin said firmly. "Your mother and I chose this life for ourselves. You 3 will have to choose your own paths. Maybe that will be here in the mountains, maybe it will be somewhere else. Either way, we will love you and support you." Grace looked relieved. "I am not saying I want to leave, I just want to know I could if I wanted to." "You can," Sophia assured her. You can do anything you want, Grace. Be anything you want. We raised you to be strong and independent for exactly that reason. As it turned out, when the time came, Grace did choose to leave, at least for a while. At 18, she took a teaching position in Durango, wanting to experience life in a bigger town. It broke Franklin's heart a little to watch her go, but he was also proud of her courage and independence. Hope, on the other hand, fell in love with a young man from Silverton when she was 19, a carpenter's apprentice with kind eyes and good hands. Franklin interrogated the poor boy thoroughly before giving his blessing, but eventually he had to admit that the young man was worthy of his daughter. Samuel, as he grew into a young man, showed every sign of following in his father's footsteps. He loved the mountains, loved the hunting and trapping, loved the solitary work of the high country. Franklin taught him everything he knew, and Samuel absorbed it all like a sponge. "He is just like you," Sophia told Franklin one evening as they watched Samuel, now 16, prepare his gear for a solo trip into the backcountry. "He is better than me," Franklin said proudly. "Smarter, more skilled. He is going to be fine." "Just like his father," Sophia repeated, smiling. The years continued to pass, bringing changes and challenges. There were hard winters when food ran low and they had to carefully ration supplies. There were illnesses and injuries that tested their resilience. There were disagreements and frustrations because no life is perfect, no matter how much love exists within it. But through it all, Franklin and Sophia remained partners in the truest sense. They supported each other, challenged each other, loved each other with a depth that only grew with time. When they had been married for 20 years, Franklin surprised Sophia with a trip to Denver. It was the farthest she had traveled since coming west, and seeing a real city again after so long in the mountains was both thrilling and overwhelming. "It is so loud," she marveled, watching the bustling streets from their hotel window. "And so crowded. How did I ever live like this?" "You were a different person then," Franklin said, coming to stand behind her and wrap his arms around her waist. "We both were." They spent a week in Denver, seeing the sights, eating in restaurants, going to a real theater to see a play. It was wonderful and exciting, and by the end of the week, they were both ready to go home. "That was a wonderful gift," Sophia told Franklin on the train back to Silverton. "But I am ready to be home, ready to see our mountains again." "Me too," Franklin agreed. "I do not belong in cities, never did, never will." When they returned to the cabin, Samuel was there waiting for them, having kept everything running smoothly in their absence. At 20, he was a full-grown man now, tall and broad like his father, with the same quiet competence. "Everything all right?" Franklin asked. "Everything is fine, Pa. The traps are all checked. I got a deer yesterday, so we have plenty of meat, and I fixed that loose board on the porch." Franklin clapped his son on the shoulder, pride evident in his face. "Good work, son." Grace came home for a visit that summer, bringing stories of her life teaching in Durango. She had grown into a confident young woman, well-read and well-spoken, but still with that fearless spark that had defined her since childhood. "I have been offered a position at a school in Colorado Springs," she told her parents over dinner. "It is a much bigger city, more opportunities." "Will you take it?" Sophia asked, trying to keep her voice neutral. Grace was quiet for a moment. "I think so. I want to see more of the world, Mama. I want to experience things beyond teaching school in a small mountain town." "Then you should go," Franklin said firmly. "You are smart and capable. You will do well wherever you go." "You are not upset." "Upset? No. I am proud of you, Grace. You are making your own choices, living your own life. That is exactly what your mother and I wanted for you." Hope's wedding took place in Silverton that fall, a joyous occasion that brought together the whole community. She made a beautiful bride, and her young carpenter was clearly devoted to her. They planned to stay in Silverton, building a life in the town. Two daughters living their own lives, making their own choices, Sophia said to Franklin as they danced at the reception. We did well, did we not? We did. And we still have Samuel. For now, Sophia said with a knowing smile. Have you seen the way he looks at the blacksmith's daughter when we are in town? Franklin groaned. Not yet. He is too young. He is 20, the same age you were when you came west, and I was 22 when I came here to marry you. If he finds someone who makes him happy, we will support that too. I know, Franklin sighed, but I am not ready to lose all my children yet. You are not losing them. They are just growing up, spreading their wings. We raised them to be independent. This is what success looks like. As Sophia had predicted, Samuel did eventually court the blacksmith's daughter, a spirited young woman named Emma who loved the mountains as much as he did. They married when Samuel was 22, and unlike his sisters, Samuel brought his bride to live at the cabin, at least until they could build their own place nearby. Franklin and Sophia suddenly found themselves with a new daughter-in-law living under their roof. But Emma fit into their life seamlessly, working alongside Sophia, learning the rhythms of mountain life, bringing fresh energy and laughter to the cabin. I think I like having a full house again, Sophia admitted to Franklin one night. It reminds me of when the children were small. Give it time, Franklin said dryly. They will have children of their own soon enough, and then we will have grandchildren running around. He was right. Within 2 years, they had 3 grandchildren. Hope had 2 babies in quick succession, and Grace, who had married a teacher she met in Colorado Springs, had a son. Samuel and Emma added to the count with a daughter they named Faith, continuing the virtue name tradition. Franklin Cooper, fierce mountain man and skilled trapper, turned out to be a complete softy when it came to grandchildren. Sophia often found him on the porch with little Faith on his knee, telling her stories or carving her small wooden toys. You were like this with our children too, Sophia said, watching them with a smile. Was I? I do not remember being this foolish over them. You absolutely were. You are a wonderful father and grandfather, Franklin Cooper, even if you pretend to be all tough and serious. Life continued its steady rhythm. Seasons changed, children grew, time passed. Franklin's hair began to gray at the temples, and Sophia noticed her own reflection showing the passage of years. But they were still strong, still capable, still deeply in love. On their 25th wedding anniversary, they took a day just for themselves. Samuel and Emma watched the cabin, and Franklin took Sophia on a ride up to a high meadow he had discovered years ago but never shown her. It was breathtakingly beautiful, a hidden valley surrounded by peaks, filled with wildflowers and crossed by a crystal stream. They dismounted and walked hand in hand through the grass, not talking, just being together. Finally, Franklin stopped and turned to face her. 25 years ago, you stood on a train platform for 6 hours waiting for me. I remember. You could have left, could have decided I was not coming, that it was not worth it, but you waited. I had faith in you, and you have been proving that faith right ever since. He took both her hands in his. You gave me everything, Sophia. A family, a home, a reason to be more than just a man surviving in the wilderness. You made my life rich and full and meaningful. Tears welled in Sophia's eyes. You gave me freedom, Franklin. The freedom to be myself, to build the life I wanted, to raise our children in a place of beauty and purpose. You gave me a partnership in the truest sense. Worth every mile, Franklin said softly, echoing the words he had spoken that first day. Every single mile I have walked beside you. They stood there in the high meadow, 2 people who had started as strangers connected by letters and had become partners, lovers, parents, and grandparents. They had built a life together in the wilderness, raised children who were strong and kind, and loved each other through all the challenges and joys that life had brought. "What do you think our next 25 years will bring?" Sophia asked. Franklin smiled. "More grandchildren, probably. Maybe even great-grandchildren if we live long enough. More seasons in these mountains. More mornings waking up beside you. That sounds perfect." As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink and purple, they made their way back to their horses. The ride down the mountain was peaceful, both of them lost in their own thoughts but together in spirit. When they returned to the cabin, they found Samuel and Emma had prepared a special dinner for them, and Faith had picked wildflowers to decorate the table. It was a simple celebration, but it was perfect for who they were and the life they had built. That night, lying in bed with Franklin's arms around her, Sophia thought about the young woman she had been, standing on that train platform in her best blue dress, nervous and hopeful and determined. She thought about all the moments since then, the challenges overcome, the joys celebrated, the life built day by day, choice by choice. "What are you thinking about?" Franklin murmured, half asleep. "How grateful I am," she said, "for all of it, the hard parts and the easy parts. The fear and the courage, the waiting and the arriving, all of it led to this, to us, to our family." "Me too," Franklin said, pulling her closer. "I love you, Sophia Cooper." "I love you too, Franklin Cooper. Always." The years continued to unfold with their particular mix of ordinary days and extraordinary moments. Grace had 2 more children in Colorado Springs, and she wrote regular letters full of news about city life and her growing family. Hope's family thrived in Silverton, with her husband's carpentry business doing well enough to build them a fine house on the edge of town. Samuel and Emma eventually built their own cabin about a mile from Franklin and Sophia's place, close enough to help each other but far enough to maintain independence. Franklin, now in his 50s, was still strong and capable, though he admitted to Sophia that the cold winters bothered his joints more than they used to. "Getting old," he said ruefully one morning after a particularly cold night. "Getting distinguished," Sophia corrected. "The gray in your hair makes you look wise and creaky." But he still worked his trap lines, still hunted, still provided for their family. And Sophia, approaching 50 herself, still managed their home with the same efficiency and grace she always had. They had settled into a comfortable rhythm of life, dividing their time between their cabin and visits with children and grandchildren. Every few months, they made the trip to Silverton to see Hope's family, and once a year, they traveled to Colorado Springs to visit Grace. Samuel and Emma and little Faith were regular visitors, often stopping by for dinner or asking Franklin's advice on some aspect of mountain living. One spring morning, as they sat on their porch watching the sunrise paint the mountains pink and gold, Sophia said, "We should write down our story." "Our story?" "Yes, how we met, how we built this life, for our grandchildren and their children, so they know where they came from." Franklin considered this. "I am not much of a writer. You wrote beautiful letters once. That was different. That was trying to win your heart." "Well, we will write it together. You tell the stories, I will write them down. Between us, we will capture it." And so they began the project, spending evenings recounting their life together. Sophia wrote in a leather-bound journal, filling page after page with their story. The train platform. The 6-hour wait. Franklin's first words, "Worth every mile." Their courtship, their wedding, the birth of their children, the challenges of mountain life, the joys of watching their family grow. As they worked on it together, reliving their years through stories and memories, Sophia was struck again by how rich their life had been. Not rich in the material sense, though they had always had enough. Rich in love, in purpose, in connection to the land and to each other. "Do you think the children will want to read this?" Franklin asked one evening. "I think the grandchildren will," Sophia said. "Maybe not now, but someday when they are older and starting to wonder about their own lives and choices. They will want to know that their grandmother crossed a continent on faith, that their grandfather built a life with his own hands, that love and courage can create something beautiful and lasting." Franklin was quiet for a moment, then said, "You should write that you were the brave one. I was just a man living in the mountains. You were the one who left everything familiar and took a leap into the unknown." "We were both brave," Sophia said firmly, "in different ways. You were brave enough to be vulnerable, to admit you wanted more than solitude, to open your heart to someone you had never met. That takes courage too." The journal grew thicker as the months passed, filled with their history. When it was complete, Sophia placed it in a safe spot on the shelf, knowing it would be there for future generations to discover and read. Time marched on. Faith grew from a toddler into a little girl, full of curiosity and mischief. She reminded Franklin so much of Grace at that age that it made his heart ache with nostalgia. Samuel and Emma had 2 more children, twin boys they named Jacob and Joshua, and the cabin Samuel had built had to be expanded to accommodate the growing family. Hope's oldest daughter turned out to have a gift for music, and the whole family saved up to buy her a piano, which became the centerpiece of Hope's parlor in Silverton. Grace's son showed an aptitude for mathematics and science that had his teachers predicting great things for his future. "Our family is growing in all directions," Sophia observed. "Different paths, different talents, different dreams, but all rooted in the same love," Franklin nodded. "That is how it should be. We give them roots and wings, right? We gave them the roots. Now they are using their wings." On a crisp autumn day when Franklin was 56 and Sophia was 53, they received word that Grace was coming for a visit and bringing her whole family. It had been 2 years since they had seen her, and they were excited about the reunion. Grace arrived with her husband Michael, a quiet, scholarly man who taught history, and their 3 children, now ranging in age from 10 to 15. The cabin was suddenly full of noise and laughter again, and both Franklin and Sophia reveled in it. "Mama, Papa, you both look wonderful," Grace said, embracing them. "Country life clearly agrees with you." "We are doing well," Sophia confirmed. "And you look happy." "Are you happy, Grace?" "Very happy. Michael is a good man, the children are thriving, and I love teaching. But I do miss the mountains sometimes. The city is exciting, but it does not have this." She gestured at the view, the endless forest and soaring peaks. That evening, with all 3 of their children present, along with spouses and grandchildren, the cabin was bursting at the seams. They had to eat in shifts because there was not enough room for everyone at the table at once. But nobody minded. The chaos was joyful, filled with love and laughter. After the children were in bed, the adults sat around the fire talking. Hope spoke about life in Silverton, about how the town was changing and growing. Grace talked about educational reforms and her students. Samuel discussed his plans to expand his trap lines into new territory. Franklin mostly listened, a small smile on his face, his arm around Sophia. This was what he had dreamed of all those years ago when he wrote that first letter, a family, connection, belonging. He had found it all and more. "Papa," Grace said suddenly, "tell us again about the day Mama arrived, about how you made her wait 6 hours. Franklin groaned. "You all know that story." "But I want to hear it again," Grace insisted. "I want to hear it from you." So Franklin told it, about the rock slide and the desperate ride through the night, about his fear that Sophia would have given up and left, about seeing her standing on that platform after 6 long hours of waiting. "And what did you say to her?" Grace prompted, even though she knew the answer. "I said it was worth every mile," Franklin said, looking at Sophia. "And I meant it then, and I mean it now. Every mile, every moment, every challenge, all of it was worth it to have the life we built together." Sophia's eyes shimmered with tears. Still the same mountain man who knows the perfect thing to say when it matters most. The visit was too short, as visits always are. When Grace and her family left to return to Colorado Springs, there were tears and promises to write more often and visit again soon. But there was also joy in knowing that the family they had created was strong and thriving, connected by love even across the miles. As autumn gave way to winter, Franklin and Sophia settled back into their quiet routine. The first snows came early that year, and they found themselves snowed in by late November. "Remember our first winter together?" Sophia asked one evening as they sat by the fire. "When I was pregnant with Grace and so nervous about everything. I remember thinking I had never been so happy and so terrified at the same time," Franklin said. "I wanted to keep you both safe, but I did not know if I could, if I was enough. You were always enough, more than enough." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the fire. Outside, the wind howled through the mountains, but inside they were warm and safe. "Sophia," Franklin said eventually, "I have been thinking about something." "What is it?" "We should start teaching Samuel everything about the trap lines, all the secrets I have learned over the years. The best places, the best techniques. I want him to have all that knowledge." Sophia looked at him carefully. "You are not planning on stopping, are you? You are still strong, Franklin. You have years of good work left in you. I know, but I am not as young as I was. And I want to make sure Samuel is fully prepared to take over when the time comes. Whether that is next year or in 10 years, I want him ready." "That is wise," Sophia agreed. "Though I cannot imagine you not working the trap lines. It is such a part of who you are." "It is. But being your husband and a father and grandfather, that is more who I am now. The trapping is what I do. You and our family are who I am." The winter passed peacefully. Spring came with its usual glory of melting snow and bursting wildflowers. Franklin did begin teaching Samuel his deepest knowledge of the trap lines, and Samuel absorbed it all eagerly, honored to be trusted with his father's life's work. Hope announced she was expecting again, her 5th child, and Grace wrote that her daughter was engaged to a young lawyer from Denver. The family continued to grow and change, and Franklin and Sophia were at the center of it all, the roots from which everyone else had grown. On a beautiful summer morning, when the air was crisp and clear, and the mountains seemed to touch the sky, Franklin and Sophia took a ride together, just the two of them. They went to the hidden meadow where they had celebrated their 25th anniversary, the place that had become special to them. They dismounted and walked through the wildflowers, hand in hand. "You ever wonder what would have happened if I had not gotten delayed that day?" Franklin asked. "If I had been at the station when the train arrived like I was supposed to be," Sophia considered this. "I suppose our first meeting would have been less dramatic, but we still would have fallen in love. We still would have built this life together." "You think so?" "I know so. Because what we have is not based on dramatic gestures or perfect timing. It is based on who we are, on the values we share, on our commitment to each other. That would have existed whether you were on time or 6 hours late." "Still," Franklin said, pulling her close, "I am glad it happened the way it did. Your willingness to wait, to have faith in me even when I had given you no reason to. That told me everything I needed to know about your character and your commitment. It set the tone for our whole marriage." "Worth every mile," Sophia whispered, repeating his words from that day so long ago. Worth every mile, Franklin agreed. Worth every hardship, every challenge, every cold winter and hot summer. Worth all of it for you, for us, for this life. They stood there in their special meadow, two people who had taken a leap of faith together and had been rewarded with a lifetime of love and purpose. Around them, the mountains stood eternal, witnesses to their story, as they had been witnesses to countless other stories over the ages. Franklin and Sophia did not know how many more years they would have together, but they knew that whatever time remained would be spent the way they had spent the previous decades, working together, loving each other, watching their family grow, and being grateful for every single day. As they rode back down the mountain toward home, toward the cabin Franklin had built with his own hands and the life they had created together, Sophia thought about that young woman on the train platform all those years ago. She wanted to tell her that the wait would be worth it, that the man who arrived 6 hours late would prove to be worth every single minute of waiting and worth every mile of the journey. She wanted to tell her that the life ahead would be harder than anything she had imagined, but also richer, fuller, more meaningful than she had ever dreamed possible. But that young woman had taken the leap anyway, armed with nothing but letters and hope and courage. And that had made all the difference. The cabin came into view as they rounded the final bend in the trail, and Sophia felt the same sense of homecoming she felt every time she saw it. This was where she belonged. This rough cabin in the Colorado mountains with the man riding beside her, this life they had built from nothing but love and determination. Franklin dismounted first and came to help her down, his hands strong and sure at her waist, just as they had been that first day and every day since. Their eyes met and no words were needed. Everything that mattered was there in that look: love, gratitude, partnership, commitment. Together they unsaddled the horses and turned them into the corral. Together they walked toward the cabin, his arm around her shoulders, her arm around his waist. Together they stepped through the door into their home, into their life, into the story they were still writing day by day. And outside, the mountains stood eternal. The stream bubbled its endless song, and the wind whispered through the pines, all of it bearing witness to a love story that had started with a 6-hour wait and would last a lifetime. The sun set slowly over the San Juan Mountains, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and purple and pink, and Franklin and Sophia Cooper sat on their porch, watching the day end and feeling deeply, profoundly grateful for every moment of the journey that had brought them here. Worth every mile indeed.